All right, everybody, welcome to episode 2 of the Black Dog Confessional. As always, I am here with Redbird, Chris Cardinal.
Hello, Steven.
It's good to see you. You look lovely today.
It's
well
good to
rested.
see you.
Well rested.
Yes.
And we have Jesse, our producer, and we have a special guest today. A very, very, very 20-year long relationship with this guy. So we've been friends a long time. It's my buddy Josh Vandegrift, and he's gonna tell us a story a little bit later. But first, wanted to get into thanking everybody for following us last show. We had a ton of views, and that meant a lot. Chris and I really appreciate that. And if you guys didn't get to see the first episode, it is on Facebook. Later today, I'll be launching it on our YouTube channel. So you'll be able to find it through various sources of media. If you want to find us on Spotify or iTunes or any of that stuff, please go to Space Coast Podcast, and you'll be able to see all the Space Coast Podcast shows. If you want to find us quick, you can go to theblackdogconfessional.com. That's blackdogconfessional.com. I said it twice. There you go. And right on the page that says podcast, you can click on that, and you can listen to it. It'll take you right to the page. That's going to be our most recent one. After today, episode 1 will be taken down. Episode 2 will go up. Chris.
Steven.
You ready for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, there's food.
Yeah,
I'm always ready.
See, whenever I want to get Chris activated into the conversation, I just mention something food related. He gets very excited, and we can, progress on. Oh, what is that? Is that you scratching, or are you doing some kind of Italian gesture towards me?
No.
Okay, good.
I get excited until somebody shows up with green bean casserole. It's just the worst.
It is.
It gets in the way of turkey. Thanksgiving plate should be turkey, mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes. Other than that, they don't need anything else.
Gotcha. I'm okay with most of that. I like stuffing. I gotta have my stuffing.
Depends. People start to throw onions and celery and other stuff that ruins it. It's no good. You can go with Hawaiian rolls if you need something to add on there.
Oh, okay. Excellent. So my buddy Josh is with us today. I met Josh probably 20 years ago. We're saying circa 99-ish. So it's been a minute. I remember the first time I pulled up to this dude's house, there was a bunch of people outside staring at a bunch of kids getting ready to skateboard off a ramp that was all the way attached to the roof of your house. And I was like, I don't know what's going on, but John Giles Pinto was out front, and John was living with you at the time. Yeah. And I remember going in and first being amazed that there was a ramp going all the way to the top of the roof of this house, and the kids that were probably like 10, 11, 12 that were getting ready to drop in. And then the driveway wasn't very long.
No, and it was on a hill.
Yeah, it was on a hill, so you would go straight down. Then I go into the house, and I remember your guys' room was like off to the right, and there was you, John, and Micah all living in the same room.
Yeah. And
there was like show flyers for all the punk shows on the walls and signs and all sorts of stuff. And, and I was like, I don't even know these guys yet, but I like these guys, and that kind of, I think I'm pretty positive all we wore were camouflage shorts and either white tank top undershirts or black t-shirts. That was for band shirts.
And Adidas shoes, don't forget
and Adidas shoes. We had to have the shell tops, because we're taking it back. We're taking it back to the Sambas, and so we go very far back. Josh has a very interesting story, and I want to give him the full time that he needs. So we're going to take our break early. We're going to go pretty much now. We're going to take a quick break, and give Josh the amount of time he needs to tell a story, and I think you guys are really going to feel what he's got to say. So we'll be right back.
Jesse, have you ever wondered what is the best way to interview applicants for your open position so you have the best chance of hiring a keeper?
All the time.
Well, I talk to managers every day, Jesse, that use their gut instinct to make a hire. Sometimes that works out, but more times than not, it can lead to a bad hire. Replacing a poor hire can be expensive and hurt morale. One of our most popular service offerings at HR Office Savers is teaching employers how to be better interviewers. Improved interviewing techniques lead to better hiring, which leads to better employee retention, which leads to less turnover and more profit. Contact me today to find out how you can learn to be a better interviewer. I can be reached online at www.hrofficesavers.com or by phone 928-308-4506. Again, that's 928-308-4506. 928-308-4506.
Hey, make sure you check out Space Cowboy Justice with your hosts, Blake Stewart and Paul Daly. We're going to be talking about interesting legal issues in the entertainment industry and everything geek. If you're into Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, comic books, we're talking about it. Coming at you from the Space Coast Podcast Studios.
You're listening to the Space Coast Podcast Network. If you'd like to be featured as a guest or sponsor or even host your own show, please email us at spacecoastpodcast@hotmail.com. That is spacecoastpodcast@hotmail.com. Space Coast Podcast. Talk hard.
All right, we are back. So like I said, my buddy Josh Vandegrift, he has been part of something that has definitely impacted many lives. And, I just wanted to give him an opportunity to voice that out, because what he has to say, I feel, is extremely important. I would like to say this, though. Jesse and Chris have no idea what Josh's background is. I wanted them to hear it from him and not from me, because this is his story. And I think it's that important that it comes from his mouth, that it shouldn't come from mine. So without any further ado, I'm going to leave this up to Josh.
All right. Cool. Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no worries.
And all that. So, kind of a tough story to tell, but I'll do my best. Start off by saying I'm the oldest of 5 kids, military brat. Didn't move around too much that I recall. Been in Florida pretty much my whole life. So just like every little boy, I wanted to, when I grew up, I wanted to be a police officer or a firefighter. So, of course, I picked the better job. and became a firefighter in 2008. So loved the job, loved helping people. Went to school. I was all laid up with the job. Went and got my paramedic. Just went above and beyond. Just trying to be the best I could at the job. So July 30th of 2016, typical hot, muggy Florida day. I showed up for shift. Shift starts at 7:30. Checking out my truck. I was riding in the back that day, and about 8:15 we get a call about 100 yards from my fire station at an intersection there, and it was vehicle first pedestrian. So we all jump in the truck and pull out. I jump out of the truck first, and my job, was patient care. So there was a bunch of people surrounding, and I'm like, get out of the way, and I look down, and I see my youngest brother is the victim. And I didn't really know what to do other than rely on my training and start trying to treat him. But at the same time, I was extremely, obviously, upset. I was screaming his name, but I could tell he was gone, just my years on the job. Once the cops on scene found out that it was my brother, they got me away from there as fast as they could. And they did CPR on my brother. They got him back a couple times. Flew him to the trauma center, and he survived about 8 hours. And then, of course, my dad lives out of town, so I was next of kin. So Doc came out and said that I was next of kin, so I made the decision to cease efforts. Processing all that emotion took a couple days, obviously, and I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't focus. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. It felt like I was just in this fog. So I knew I needed help. I reached out to my department, thinking I got injured on the job, it would be covered, just like everything else. It was then that I learned that a mental or nervous injury is not covered unless it's accompanied by a physical injury. So had I sprained my ankle out there in the middle of the road with my little brother, I would have been covered. I wasn't. So it was up to me to go find help for myself. Luckily, well, he wasn't a lieutenant at the time, but a friend of mine from work, his wife is a psychologist, and referred me to someone. I went and saw him about a week after the accident, and he immediately diagnosed me with severe PTSD. I went and saw him, paid out of my own pocket for months and months and months, twice a week, to go see him because I knew something was wrong. And it was a struggle. It's still hard. I mean, over 2 years ago, it happened, and the first year was really tough. Nightmares. I refer to it as fighting the demons in my brain every day. Work comp finally came through about 6 months later and paid for a psychiatrist as well as my psychologist, and got me on some meds, and I was on those for a short time. I don't like taking pills, but and they started messing me up, and I just couldn't do the pills anymore, so I started looking for different avenues, and found acupuncture really helped.
Really?
Yeah. I thought it was voodoo stuff, and I was in a support group, and the acupuncture doctor was in there, and she's local. She used to be a firefighter. So she's like, you need to come see me. So I started seeing her a couple times a week and started improving mentally. So once I started equalizing, oh wait, let me back up. About a month after the accident, there was a month prior to the accident was the Pulse shooting in Orlando. And I saw on the news one day, there was a cop struggling with PTSD. And I was like, I got to talk to this guy. We're going through similar stuff at the same time. Reached out to him. We started talking. We became good friends. He said, you need to talk to my wife because my wife is pissed because they're not covering me either. So she started petitioning lawmakers to change the law so that you don't have to have a physical injury accompanying a mental or nervous injury. So I joined the team, went up to Tallahassee, I don't even know how many times, just talking to different senators, testifying before committees, trying to get this through, just telling my story. And I want to say it was May of this year, the Governor Scott finally signed it into law. It went official October 1. And we knew that in doing this, it wasn't going to benefit us in any way. We were left to fight what everybody before us had been fighting. And we wanted to change that because it was wrong. At the time, Florida was one of 17 states that didn't recognize mental or nervous injury as an injury, on-the-job injury. So we got it passed and went into law, and it was a lot of work, a lot of. it's really hard mentally to tell the story, and then imagine standing in front of, a bunch of senators, and
Absolutely.
everybody's busy, and taking phone calls and taking notes. But whenever we told our stories, the first time I think there was like 4 or 5 of us, the room was silent. So it was definitely a lot of work, lots of, it was a team effort. I just really went up and told my story. But in the long run, it passed, and now Florida is part of that group that recognize it.
Which is an amazing feat when you actually think about, getting that passed and getting it put out for, hundreds of thousands of public safety people across the state of Florida. The effort that you put in is not only extremely amazing, but there's a lot of stigma that comes with us in law enforcement and in firefighters, that we're just supposed to tough it out. We see what we see, we tough it out. It is what it is. And I think for years and years and years, that mentality resulted in a lot of suicide. It really did.
Yeah, actually, in 2017, the fire service saw more deaths by suicide than line of duty.
Yep.
That's
It's funny you brought that up, because I actually have the 2017 stats here, and it actually discusses that suicide was 103 firefighters and 140 law enforcement officers, compared to line of duty deaths, which were 93 for firefighters and 129 for law enforcement. So suicide was actually a higher cause of death, which I thought, wow. When you actually think about it, you brought up struggling with your own demons. That's what I think a lot of people do. And I gotta say, there was a statistic back when I was involved in my officer-involved shooting, where they said that usually anybody who's involved in an officer-involved shooting that involves a death will retire within 2 years of that incident because of all the issue. But I think we do a lot of training on, especially in law enforcement, where we put a paper target up and we put 2 rounds center mass in a paper target, but we don't do 2 rounds center mass into a living human person where there's crying or screaming, or now you're put into a position of rendering aid, very similar to what you had to experience, but only a tenth of that. When you run out and that's your brother, that's your blood. And for people who don't know Josh was kind of like a father figure in his family for a while. He was the oldest brother. His mom was sick with cancer, and there was a time where Josh was the guy, and did a lot, because your sisters were young at the time, 8, 9 probably.
Yeah, something like that.
And because when your mom passed, they couldn't have been teenagers yet, were they?
No, they weren't.
So you have dealt with not only accepting a role of an adult as a teenager, but then you spin off, and Nate was kind of like one of your kids, not only your brother, but you raised him, and just the impact on that alone is just intense. Chris, you got thoughts? Chris is just,
I'm just trying to absorb it all, man. That's heavy.
It is.
It's very heavy, but I had 2 choices: sit down and give up, lay down, give up, whatever you want to say, or fight.
No, I think doing that is huge. I agree with Steve. I think in both lines of work, we're all taught to be alphas, and you don't want to show any signs of weaknesses. And it's actually something we've been talking about around work, that when things happen and whether they're super emotional like that, or just some sort of stressful thing, or just something that can mess with your mind a little bit, rather than talking about it, we just compartmentalize it and set it somewhere. And at some point, those emotions are going to come out, and most of the time, it's not going to be a positive effect when it does. And so we need to work on changing that culture, that it's okay to say, hey, this happened, this bothered me, or this is still messing with my head a little bit. I need to get this fixed. And if what you're saying, you guys didn't offer, it doesn't count as a workman comp issue at the time, how are you supposed to get that help to help fix yourself then?
Yeah, basically I was told, suck it up or don't come back.
Right.
I did take 6 months off, obviously, after the accident. A lot of guys donated time, which was I'm eternally grateful for. But there came a day where I got a phone call that said, I think it was a Thursday, you need to come back by Monday or you don't have a job anymore because you're out of time and we're not allowing anybody else to donate time to you. So I did go back for a little over a year. And my wife, every time I came home, was like, I want you to quit. You need to get out of there. It's not helping you get any better. And I was like, I know, but, I want to at least get vested and at least try. My brother wouldn't have wanted me to quit. I've since left, as of August of this year, left the fire service, and I can tell mentally, emotionally, people that saw me after the accident have said, that I see now, say, what happened? You're completely different. Like, well, I left. I couldn't do it anymore. Another thing I wanted to touch on is these agencies, fire and police, have EAP set up. So I learned something about EAP recently. That's set up to CYA, the departments. If you have an issue, go to EAP. So I found out that EAP is like a jumping block for mental health doctors. It's like a clinical. They go do so much time in EAP. So if you go to EAP, you may have an issue that doctor doesn't specialize in. And it takes me back to a friend of mine who's also SO, had an incident. They sent him to EAP, and he found out the doctor he was talking to was a sex therapist, talking about PTSD.
Interesting.
Issued stuff, and he's like, this is ridiculous. They tried to set something up and help us, but it's not exactly the right thing to do. That's why I went out on my own and got my own help, which it was expensive, of course, but I knew I had to do it. I got 2 kids, and like Steve said, I got brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews, and a lot of people depend on me. So I knew I had to find a way to function.
At least you went and did that. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who would have just said, screw it, I'll just deal with it and move on. And who knows where they would be at this point, where you're mentally healthy as best you can be and seem to be in a really good place.
I still struggle, every day, but to build myself up to be mentally strong, working with all my doctors and having all these different, I call them my different paths. Like if I have a flashback or something, that has a bunch of different paths I've set up with my doctor to deal with. If none of those paths work, I back up, go down a different road. And that really has helped me tremendously, because it's not like, all right, well, you're having a bad day, take a pill. It's a bunch of different things. Acupuncture, like I said before, it's been huge.
Yeah, you're not the only one I've actually heard that from. A lot of people use acupuncture for different things, but I've actually heard several people discussing how acupuncture has helped them mentally, physically, dealt with, little things, allergies.
Mm-hmm.
But there's several that are around here that would be, I've heard good things about. From your standpoint, where do you think, obviously you're married, you have 2 kids.
Right.
How do you think your relationship helped you through all of this so far?
With my wife?
Yeah.
Well, she was the rock. We've been together since...
I can't remember a time when you weren't together.
96?
Yeah.
So, junior high. She was with me when my mom passed, and while she was sick, and just been through hell with me, basically. And then this happens, and I remember sitting in the car one night, because that was the only place where it was quiet, and I could kind of process, and she came and sat with me, and I don't know, I was probably 6 months into this process, and I told her, I was like, listen, you don't have to stick around. I'm not going to blame you if you leave. You know, I know we have 2 kids. One of them, when the accident happened, my youngest was like 5 or 6 months old. So we had an infant, and then she's dealing with me, and I'm like, I'm not going to hate you. You know, I understand. But, you know, she's like, no, I mean, I'm going to stick with you. And
mentally that had to be huge.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You know, having that partner there always is huge.
Yeah, and you know, I brought up Josh's wife because not only have I known her as long as I've known him, there is something to be said about having a stable person to lean on. And in Josh's situation, he had his wife, but there are plenty of other people that can lean on a friend or a counselor or a sponsor in some cases, you know, that can help them get through that. Because, I mean, I've seen it through drug addiction where people, they need that extra hand to kind of get up and do their thing every day. For you, I mean, having somebody in the house with you, and then having you get to look at 2 children that are kind of like that motivation every day. You know?
For sure.
But it's still hard because you're still dealing here.
And it's almost equally as hard for the spouse.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, you know, that kind of gets forgotten, you know, with all of us, you know, with these horrible stories. There's a spouse that's having to deal with kids or you, and try and keep everything kind of normal so that you can get through your healing process. So there's a lot to be said, you know, as far as people that are affected by PTSD. It's not just the firefighter, the cop, the soldier, you know, it's their spouse.
No, and I think we see an extremely high rate of divorce in our fields, in both firefighter and law enforcement. You know, there's always the joke that we have the starter wife or the starter husband, you know, because it seems like everybody has been married once and, you know, then divorced and moved on. You know, I've been there, and I know plenty of other cops who have. You know, there's a very small percentile that, you know, have actually stayed together all the way through. Because Chris is raising his hand. Go ahead.
No, I know my wife is watching, so.
Oh, so you were saying, that's me.
We're still there.
We're still there. But, you know, it's we see a lot. The divorce rate, I think in the country was like 50%. And then in law enforcement, it was like 50%. Like, it's that high, you know, because in certain cases, I know in my first relationship, my ex didn't like me bringing anything work-related home. Like, she didn't want me talking about that stuff because it would drag on her. And like you said, you know, the spouse takes just as much, and that causes a big divide. You know, it really does. Because we do see a lot. I mean, I can guarantee you, Chris can remember an exact incident that has always stuck in his mind. I mean, I can tell you the first time I saw a dead baby. You know, I can tell you exactly where we were. I can tell you what that kid looked like, and I can tell you that she was 8 months old.
And that'll stick with you forever.
And it'll stay with you forever. You know, obviously, we deal with things different ways. In being a paramedic, you see that stuff all the time, but it's totally different when it's a family member. Or it's totally different when, you know, maybe you have an 8-month-old child. Now you're looking at that 8-month-old baby, and you're like, man, that could be me. I mean, how many times have we been on car crashes?
Well, I mean, your whole world changes when you start working and you have a child. And for most people, because now everything starts you start looking at things different. Now you have something, you need to come home. There's somebody else relying on you to care for them. And so the way you act, the things you do will affect them. So that changes stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just you want to take a quick break, and we'll bring it back here in a second. Stand by.
All right, in the studio, breaking news. This guy literally just broke down the door. He's got incredible news. His name is John Adams with the Fix Therapy. John, what's so important? What's going on?
Well, we've got some exciting stuff to talk about.
Well, tell me, what do you have to share?
Well, I've got a brand new podcast coming to you called The Live Life Aware, where we're going to be discussing all kinds of fun topics like biohacking.
Whoa.
Yes. We're going to be talking about integrated medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be talking about some really new hot topics in Florida with medical marijuana and CBD.
I see. Well, that sounds exciting. So what else can the listener expect?
Well, fun facts of the body. Did you know that one red blood cell carries 1 billion oxygen molecules?
That's a lot. I had no idea.
Yeah, so if you looked up into the night sky,
right,
you could take every little star
and
put them on one red blood cell.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. So all kinds of trivia, surprise guests, and things that you're not going to hear about just hanging out in your family practitioner's doctor's office.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking about all the stuff you're not listening or hearing from maybe your general practitioner.
Amazing. All right. Thanks so much, John. Live Life Aware, guys, coming soon from the Space Coast Podcast Studios.
You're listening to the Space Coast Podcast Network. If you'd like to be featured as a guest or sponsor or even host your own show, please email us at spacecoastpodcast@hotmail.com. That is spacecoastpodcast@hotmail.com. Space Coast Podcast. Talk hard.
Well, there's the X. I guess I'll sign right here.
Stop! Did you even read it?
No, I usually don't.
How many pages is that?
Like 20?
You could be giving away your firstborn son in that contract.
It's a pretty good point. I don't want to do that.
Or that's a lease, right? You could be giving your landlord rights to have their Fat Uncle Joe come and use your coffee maker whenever they want.
Uncle Joe's fine, but not Fat Uncle Joe.
Yeah, not that one.
Well, this is a lot of legal information. I don't really know it. Who could I go for this?
Well, that's exactly why we have Blake Stewart at Stewart Law. He specializes in business, contracts, and construction law, and he has negotiated low prices for contract reviews, just for cases like this. Check him out on Facebook, Stewart Law CS.
Or on the web at stewartlawcs.com.
Or give me a call at 321-541-6845.
All right, we are back. Like I said, I'm here with Jesse, Redbird, and my buddy Josh. We see you guys commenting. Thank you for all your comments. Please continue to comment. The more you comment, the more we can reply to you. I see you, Lincoln. I see you, brother. Lincoln definitely has been a good buddy of mine since I met him a couple of years back, and he's definitely a dude that stood up when we needed some help one night. So I definitely appreciate you tuning in, brother. Chris.
Yeah, so the stuff, and I know we've been going over some pretty heavy stuff, and I don't mean to derail us too much, but I do have some questions about the acupuncture you're talking about.
Sure.
Because the only thing I understand from acupuncture is it's needles that are strategically placed somewhere on you, depending on what the issue is. So how do they target and locate things to help you with something like PTSD?
So initially when I went in, I went in like with the attitude of, yeah, whatever.
Right.
But I looked at it as, another tool to help me. So the doctor explained to me that there's various points in your body that correlate with certain things. So it's a very small needle. It doesn't, it's just a little pinch. If you got tattoos, you can handle it.
Well, Chris has
I'll tell you a tattoo story later.
Chris has some good tattoos.
You might rethink that.
But you may want to lift that arm up right there and show him that dragon real quick.
We'll do it later.
Okay.
It's a heavy segment. It's a heavy show. We'll save that one for later.
So yeah, you sit with her, and you tell her what's going on, and she knows, she's a doctor, on where to place the needles. So for me, she does, it's like 5 or 6 in each ear. does a couple in each arm, and then a couple in my belly area, and then I've had ankle issues since we used to play soccer after.
Yeah.
What was it, Sundays?
Yeah, Sunday soccer.
Yeah, Sunday soccer. So I told her about that too, and she started just sticking needles in my foot, and you lay there for like 15 minutes, super relaxing, half hour, something like that, and then she flips you over and then does some more needles down the back. She explained it to me that everywhere a needle goes, there's like a pressure point, but think of it like a dam.
Okay.
So when the needle goes in, it breaks the dam. So after my first session, I went home and had some dinner, had a couple beers, and I'm like, man, I don't feel good. So she texted me, the doctor did. She's like, hey, how you feeling? I was like, I don't feel good. She's like, all right, have you ever had a deep tissue massage? I was like, no, but I've heard that deep tissue massage will release all the toxins into your body and make you feel kind of sick. Mm-hmm. She said it's the same concept. You're releasing all that backed up energy, toxins, whatever, and it's just filtering through your body. So after the first one, I mean, it didn't hit me like that anymore. But it's really fascinating, and it's something that's been around for thousands of years. So I was having a couple of issues with some pills that were prescribed to me. I'm like, oh, if I take that one and have 3 of these beers, I'm gonna feel okay.
Right.
So I would only take the pills when I got really bad, and my wife one day was like, you're a monster when you take that pill. I'm like, all right, that one's gone. So I had to find something else, and acupuncture was that next tool.
So is it trial and error as she's putting the needles in, or she just knows?
She knows
already.
And she has a model of a body, and she'll show you if you have questions. I'm like, how do you know where to put it? She's like, well, this point here in your ear correlates with this one in your foot, and if you put a needle here and a needle here, it's like electricity.
Right.
So it's really fascinating, but
So weird.
It's
so weird.
It's just not something you would think of. Like I've heard, like you're saying, with their ankle and other physical ailments. I've never really heard of anybody using it for a mental ailment.
No, I've heard of a lot of people who use it for different things. But you brought up something that I definitely want to touch on is the actual prescription medications. There are a lot of people that immediately go to take this will help you, but that too can have its issues. That too has its side effects, and like you mentioned, one turns you into the beast. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, which we've heard of, and then we also hear of people getting addicted to that, or depending on that. It may not even have addictive qualities to it, but they have that pleasure aspect of it, where that's the addiction point of it, where they feel like this makes me feel good, so I need to keep taking this. And if I take one of these and drink these 2 beers, that escalates that, and that's where we wind up seeing significant long-term problems, not only mentally, because eventually that pill wears off, and you still haven't dealt with this.
Right.
And that's why it's so huge about you talking about the psychiatrist and psychologist, and how you've opened up with your wife and having that open line of communication with us today. Like I told you when I first hit you up about coming to do this, I really feel that your story is one that is part of a changing time, where we in law enforcement, firefighter, public safety in general, military, we have a lot of people coming back from overseas that have seen some serious stuff, and we have to get past some of those stigmas that go along with that, because we're tough guys, we're tough girls, we're tough whatever, we got to come back. We saw that, but we're good. There are people who aren't good. I remember somebody came up to me after I was involved in my shooting and said, you're gonna have nightmares. And I never had nightmares, but apparently he did when he got into his shooting. Nothing wrong with that. It's just part of your body dealing with it. I got to tell you, I saw a person speak. His name was Colonel Charlie Plum. Actually, I saw a video of it. And if you've never seen Colonel Charlie Plum speak, he was a Vietnam pilot that got shot down. And when he, Colonel or Captain, I can't remember exactly what his rank was. I don't want to misquote him, but he had gotten shot down over Vietnam, and when they took him as a hostage, his mentality was different than some of the other people there. And there was a seaman that was there who had been picked up, and Charlie Plum was obviously in the Air Force, and he said, why are you always in a good mood? We were captured. And the seaman said, no, I was rescued. I fell off the boat, and they took me out. I would have drowned if they hadn't. But their minds were different. Their perspectives were different. One looked at it like being captured, and the other one looked at it as being rescued. And Charlie Plum basically said, from that point on, I had to change my mindset if I wanted to survive. If I wanted to make it through this, and I believe he was captured for 7 years, he had to get back. And one of the things he talked about, and I actually saw this probably 2 months before I got my shooting, and he basically said, you have a backpack and you have the chute, like you're going to jump out of an airplane, right? He said the chute is information and the backpack is your brain. He goes, if you just take that chute and you shove it in there, when you go to jump out of that plane, your parachute's not going to deploy because it wasn't packed properly. So all that information that we get, that tactical training, that whatever we have to use to go into gross muscle movement or however it goes, all of that stuff has to be packed properly. If we just shove it in that bag, when it takes time to deploy it, it's not going to open. And it's all about that mindset of mental preparedness. And I got to tell you, when I started getting dressed every day, every time I would put my gun belt on, I would think, hey, tonight might be that night you have to get into a shooting. Are you good with that? And I'd say, yes, I'm good with that. And I would click my belt. And I still do that. And because you never know what's going to happen, but I always wanted to be mentally prepared. And I don't know if that affected me to the point to I felt like maybe I was more mentally prepared, because I don't think you can be mentally prepared for what you went through. I don't think there's any way you can be mentally prepared for that. But, in a situation where we're talking about implementing a training, you can kind of develop that mindset of, is tonight the night, or is this going to happen? Let me prepare for that. Running scenarios through your head, and I mean, at no point in your life do you ever run a scenario like what you went through, and that is just so, intense. Your story is probably one that has hit me the hardest, and not only because I know you, and I think it hit me harder after your brother's funeral, and I think it was because I saw you, and I looked at you and I was like, the personality going on right now, that's not Josh, and I know it's going to take some time for him to deal with. And, when Micah spoke at the funeral, that was a eulogy that always stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was real. I thought it was a real moment that he was able to portray somebody's life and what they had all gone through and everything else that led up to the death, and then basically the beginning of what you were going to be going through afterwards. Because Micah's a brilliant guy. He really is. He's just such a good-hearted dude. But like I said, the whole mental preparation part of it, I think that's something that we don't stress enough in our fields. I don't
think we stress it enough in life.
True.
Again, you can practice and get tactically sound in anything you want, but until you're put in a situation like yours or anything else, you don't know how you're going to handle it. In your mind, you might have an idea of how you're going to do it, but until it actually happens, and that's when you have to deal with it or figure out a way to deal with it.
And everybody's built differently. Some people may have been able to see what I went through or go through what I went through and be able to process it and handle it differently. Everybody's brain is obviously a little different. And the military has done a really good job of addressing PTSD and starting to get their guys treated. Unfortunately, PD and fire are about 20 years behind. But we're working on it, me telling my story, making an awareness of it. I like Steve said, we're a bunch of big tough guys. We don't like to talk. And I knew that going in, because, on the job, you just talk to your boys, after work, or maybe try to talk to your wife, but that's usually not the best idea. So,
yeah, I gotta say, talking to your wife part of it, with me, with my wife being in the same field, obviously my wife's in law enforcement also, there's times where she'll go to certain calls, or she had gone to certain calls, where I kind of see how she was going to gauge it, because I always I'm not a woman, but I've obviously never had to give birth, and I always wonder how female in law enforcement, females in any form of public safety, when you get to that traffic crash where that child's hurt, does it mean something a little different to them because they understand there's that motherhood aspect to it where, although we are obviously deeply involved in all of our kids' lives, I always feel, and like I said, I've never been in the situation as far as being a woman, but that there's more of a connection because of that 9 months of carrying, and do those calls affect them more than they affect us, or is it the same? And like you said, everybody's brain's different, but I'm always trying to analyze different things, knowing, over the past 20, 30 years, law enforcement and public safety in general, fire department, whatever it is, has changed. We have, how many more females in law enforcement do we have today than we had 34 years ago, 40 years ago now when my dad started in law enforcement? I mean, it was almost unheard of back then. Now times are changing. And I think with that, we're getting a different viewpoint of dealing with certain things that we didn't really address before because we were supposed to always be that tough guy, But it's true. We see we see things that a lot of people don't want to see, and I don't blame them, but how we deal with it really says a lot, because we have seen the rates of law enforcement and fire department people committing suicide getting higher, and how do we combat against that? How do we deal with that? And I think you're right. I think over the past few years, and specifically with cases like yours in the Pulse shooting, that was a huge issue in the state. I mean, obviously the Pulse shooting, and we could talk for hours upon hours upon hours about the Pulse shooting, but if you look at the Pulse shooting in general, that was, if you were Mateen, the shooter in that case, that is what you would consider a target-rich environment, because you go to a bar. Anybody who does carry concealed is not supposed to be carrying concealed at a bar. So you pretty much know that nobody's going to be carrying a weapon when you go there. It's dark. There's lights, maybe even fog machine. There may be things going on that are going to be distractors. So if you go in there and you have that kind of impact where you kill that many people, not only are you affecting every life that was in there, but you're also affecting every firefighter life, every police officer life. You're also affecting the economy because this happened right near Disney. This happened right near the Orlando International Airport. I mean, there's all sorts of things that go into terroristic acts that are well thought out. And that situation, the Pulse shooting, was not only huge from the standpoint that so many lives were lost, but the impact it had on the community in general, and not only that community, but the entire state. As far as developing legislation, pushing forward towards post-traumatic stress disorder, getting people mental help, and developing that. Those were things that we really weren't addressing too heavy, over the years. I mean, we only started seeing people start to offer school resources as far as mental health going within the past probably 20 years, where they started just doing the basic guidance counseling stuff to offer help in situations. And then when we started having school shootings and Columbine and moving further into that, we started seeing the necessity for people to come in and do crisis counseling. Because obviously if you're 15 years old and you're in Parkland and that happens and 17 of your classmates get killed, that's something that isn't just affecting the lives of the lives and families of those 17 people, but it's also affecting every student that went to school there, the entire community, and how do you bring something back together to heal all of that? And that's a huge undertaking, and that's not just with one law enforcement agency or one fire department. That is an entire community that has to carry on that burden and redevelop and move forward.
And a lot of it is, people throw resources at something like that right up front. But the key is continuing care. I still am in treatment, with my psychologist. And that I've learned that is probably the best thing to do, in an instance like mine and probably many others. You PTSD isn't something like you break your arm and you're in a cast for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever, and then you're good to go. It's something that follows you forever. You can manage it and just accept that you have it, but you have to take care of yourself. It's like if you have a heart condition or something.
Yeah.
You gotta take a heart pill every day. That's how I look at it.
Right.
Is I have an injury that isn't going away anytime soon. But I manage it just like I would, if I had a heart condition. I'd take a pill every day.
Yeah, and that's why I don't get why they would prescribe you pills, because the pills aren't going to fix whatever the issue is that you're trying to work past or work and now put your life around.
Yeah, you'd be on them.
I mean, it might help with some of the things it causes, anxiety, depression, things like that, but that's still not, that's cutting the limbs and not getting to the root of the tree to figure out what's going on.
Cool. All right, we'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break and be right here.
Attention buyers, sellers, and attention buyers, sellers, and investors of real estate on the Space Coast. Hey there, my name is Jesse Hall, and not only am I a full-time real estate agent with RE/MAX Elite here on the Space Coast, but I also host a fun podcast called the Space Coast Real Estate Show. Now, the Space Coast Real Estate Show is where you're going to be able to hear all the important things that affect your property, whether it's agricultural, industrial, commercial, and especially residential. We're going to talk about all those items that are important to you so that you can make the best decisions regarding your property. We're also going to bring you resources or industry experts. So whether you're looking for a pool, maybe a fence, maybe a roof, we're going to have those people talking to you directly on our show so you get the best insight possible, so you're more informed and knowledgeable. Plus, we also have fun. You're going to learn about events here on the Space Coast. We're going to be showing you what's coming, maybe down the pipeline that maybe you don't know about. So tune in, find us on Facebook, and especially subscribe to us on iTunes. We'll talk to you soon.
You're listening to the Space Coast Podcast Network. If you'd like to be featured as a guest or sponsor or even host your own show, please email us at spacecoastpodcast@hotmail.com. That is spacecoastpodcast@hotmail.com. Space Coast Podcast. Talk hard.
And we are back. Well, one of the things I wanted to add, we're getting ready to wrap this up, but big reason why I wanted to have this conversation today is obviously there are people that are struggling. If you are struggling, if you are having that issue, please utilize the resources available for you. I think I'll use him because he's a good buddy of mine, Ricky Connor. Me and Ricky talked probably about a year ago now, I think. I believe it was a Orange County firefighter committed suicide. He was their training leader.
There's been a rash of them.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one down south recently too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There was. That was another guy who was well known, well liked. Nobody really knew what he was dealing with, and then next thing you know, he's committed suicide. And This was the same with this guy from over in Orange County. He used to put together training conferences and do all that, and he wound up driving out, I believe, into Volusia County, calling on the phone and saying, my truck's here, my body's going to be here, goodbye. And, I mean, this was a guy that was very well liked. I don't believe the signs were there, but we see that a lot where we don't know that the signs are there. But if you are having a struggle and you just don't feel comfortable talking to one of your buddies, or you want to keep it private because you do have that private mentality, and you're afraid of stigmas, which, I mean, there's a lot of people who are, make sure you pick up the phone and call somebody. You can go through 211. There's all sorts of assets you can utilize off of 211. There's local nonprofits like To Write Love on Our Arms that deal with suicide prevention. But the big thing is, Josh has told everybody ways that he has learned to deal with it, whether it be through acupuncture, through counseling, through open communication with his friends and family. Being able to come here and talk about it out loud are all ways that work towards that healing. But if you're not ready to do that, then try and call somebody that's anonymous, get into a program that'll help you out, because nobody wants to see you go down that path where the demons wind up taking over you, and you're just another story in the paper of somebody who committed suicide. Josh brought up a good point when he said people throw money at problems right off the bat, and that it's great. There's a lot of people who need that help, but Josh needs long-term care. There's people who need long-term care, and this is something that we have to take note of and fund some of these organizations that are constantly providing that. I work with St. Baldrick's because it does children's cancer research, and one of the things I realized about children's cancer was I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a research chemist, and I'm not going to be the guy that can go in that lab and figure out the cure. But what I can do is I can help raise money to fund that cure, and I've been able to see that going over to Arnold Palmer and being able to give them grants that I know is going to fund specific children and specific nurses, and being able to get that all taken care of. And although we love to be able to help that problem out initially, it has to be long term. We have to continually be involved, be invested. And there's plenty of organizations locally, no matter what your charity is, that need you. Like I said, I deal with children's cancer research. I don't know, Chris, what do you deal with? You did St. Baldrick's with me a couple times. Yeah. And different avenues. I'm big on drug prevention because I see what that lifestyle leads to. I see what addiction leads to. And we don't want to see people get to that point. We don't want to see people in interview rooms talking to us. And just like we don't want to see people get to the point where their depression hits them so hard that they commit suicide. So if you want to take part and you want to help out, find a local organization where you can donate, whether it's just $20 or, $5 a month for every month, something, or one lump sum. But pick up something that that your money is going to go. And I encourage everybody to read up on whatever organization you donate to. Make sure the admin fees aren't astronomical. Make sure they're actually helping the people. But I really appreciate Josh coming, because I think he addressed everything that I thought he would today, opening up several doors for people. I mean, between looking at the counseling and the acupuncture and the open communication with family and friends, those are huge. I guarantee you, there's at least somebody out here who had no idea that acupuncture. Well, shoot, Chris didn't know.
No clue.
So I mean, that's huge. I mean, that can be an avenue to travel down. Chris, do you have anything?
Josh, I just want to thank you, man, for coming on and sharing your story. I think it'll help some people. Thanks, man. Thanks for all your work in Tallahassee to get laws passed and changed.
Huge.
It's awesome.
Jesse, you got anything to add? You've been quiet the whole time, but Jesse's been talking to us a couple times during the breaks, and it's good to have an engineer that is so into the stories that we get going on here. So, do you have anything you wanted to add?
I guess I'll try to get mic'd up. No, very powerful stuff. I have family in as first responders. I had an uncle who now is retired, but he was in Miami-Dade SWAT, all kinds of stories, and they do have that bravado. I think it's important to sometimes, approach guys and let them know you don't have to hold on to this. You know, we're all human. We deal with emotion differently. Some people lash out. Some people keep it, contained, and they don't know how to deal with it. So I think, lean on your brothers. You know, I have a good buddy from high school. He's down in Fort Lauderdale Fire Department, and he's climbing the ranks, and he sees brothers all the time go through hard stuff, and reach out, get some help. There's lots of resources out there.
Awesome. I do want to do one thing. Josh is now technically a retired firefighter, but if you guys aren't paying attention to what's going on in California, there's a lot of really bad fires going on out there. There's a lot of Josh's brothers and sisters that are working out there in the fire field that are definitely putting themselves at risk right now, because there's lots of people who have already died. I think last time I checked it was over 60, and there was like a couple of thousand people missing. So, and they're having trouble identifying bodies, and it's a really terrible situation. There's lots of organizations out there right now that are looking for assistance. They're probably your Red Crosses and things like that are trying to help those families that have now been displaced because they don't have homes anymore or have lost family members. I'm a big hockey fan. I know there's a shirt company called Bring Hockey Back. They're actually running a first responder shirt right now, where all the profits are going out to them, and they do charity work all the time. They do lots of good stuff where they actually send the profits out to people. Josh, do you have any closing statements?
Just thanks for having me on, allow me to tell my story. Like Steve said, if you're struggling, there's avenues for help. You don't have to sit in your dark room, drinking your bottle of whiskey with your 45 sitting next to you, just getting up the guts to do it. You find if you open up to a couple people about stuff that we don't want to talk about, because we're big tough guys, there's a lot of help available. And don't be a statistic.
Amen. Don't be a statistic.
Right.
There is I believe it's a suicide prevention first responders type thing. Doug Monda's got a run coming up. It's a 5K. Are you doing that too?
No, but I'm a part of that.
Oh, you're gonna be part of that? Okay. What is that?
It's called Survive First. It's a local organization that they are putting together. It's taken some time to help first responders struggling. If their idea is, if you come to them, they are going to get you whatever help you need.
Awesome. So cool. I think that is a great way to end this. Josh, thank you for not only coming today, but for being a great friend for the last 20 years. Much respect for everything that you did 20 years ago for your mom and for your family, and being that stand-up guy. I can't say, there are no words to say how proud I am of how Mike has turned out and just everything he's been doing in the education field. It's super cool to see, how everybody's progressed. So thank you for coming today, and thank you all for listening. This will be up on YouTube later. It's going to be on Facebook like ASAP. Please, if you think this will affect somebody, share it out. Let people know about it. And thank you guys for all the support.